I never thought the day I nearly lost my life inside a crumpled Chevrolet Silverado would be the exact day I finally saw my only son for who he really was. I was lying on a hospital gurney with cracked ribs and blood drying over my eyes, and when the ER nurse called him, my son's only response was, "Is he dead? Because if he's not, I have a flight to Miami Beach to catch." Welcome to Dad's Ultimate Payback. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from today. Trust me, what I did the moment I walked out of that hospital, my son never saw coming. I've lived in Atlanta for over 30 years, settled in a quiet, historic Victorian home in Inman Park, just Mason and me. I raised my son as a single father after his mother passed away from cancer when he was only 13 years old. For 17 years, it was just the two of us. Those early days were tough. There were long stretches where I worked back-to-back double shifts as a senior infrastructure engineer, supervising heavy railroad expansion projects across Georgia, just to keep the lights on and ensure my boy's life remained frictionless. I absorbed every hardship so he would never know what sacrifice felt like. I paid his full undergraduate tuition at Emory University without letting him take out a single penny in student loans. When he met Gigi, a sharp, status-obsessed socialite from Buckhead, and decided to get married, I quietly footed the bill for a lavish wedding reception at the St. Regis Atlanta, never asking for a single dime in return. And for the past 2 years, I quietly transferred $6,800 into his checking account on the first of every month, ensuring he and Gigi could maintain their glossy lifestyle inside a sleek luxury condo overlooking Midtown Atlanta. I truly believed I was being a supportive father, helping his son get established. What I didn't realize until much later was that I was simply financing my own replacement. The reality of my new family dynamic first raised its head on the very night of their wedding at the St. Regis. As the catering staff was packing up the ballroom, I walked down the carpeted hallway toward the bridal suite to leave my card on the table. The heavy oak door was slightly ajar, and as I reached out to knock, I caught the hushed voice of Gigi's mother speaking intently to her daughter. She was helping Gigi adjust her designer dress, her voice dripping with calculating greed. "Don't second-guess marrying him for a second, Gigi," her mother whispered with a low sneer. "His father spent decades managing state infrastructure budgets. You know the old man has serious savings. Use Mason to handle your Midtown condo lease every single month." The words hit my chest like a physical blow, but I stood there in my suit, swallowed my pride, and chose not to cause a scene on my son's special night. I naively convinced myself that my hard work and quiet generosity would eventually win them over and melt away her family's arrogance. Out of devotion to my son, I actively dipped into my own retirement savings to guarantee that $6,800 monthly safety net without fail. However, the moment that first automated transfer cleared into Mason's account, Gigi's true nature showed. The very next afternoon, without a word to me, she had a locksmith come out to their Midtown high-rise, rekey the digital entrance lock, and erase my biometric access code. When I swung by the following weekend with a housewarming gift, my master key code beeped red. Gigi opened the door just 3 inches, leaning against the frame with a condescending smirk. "A modern married couple needs privacy, Garrett," she said smoothly, not even inviting me inside. "We can't have a retired railroad worker dropping in whenever he pleases. It just doesn't fit our lifestyle." I stood in the hallway holding the package, realizing that while I was pouring my savings into their foundation, my daughter-in-law was already building a wall to keep me out. The breaking point arrived on a bleak, rain-slicked Friday afternoon near Ponce de Leon Avenue. I was driving home from a hardware supply store, watching the wipers sweep across the windshield of my 2017 Chevrolet Silverado 2500, when the world violently shattered. A commercial flatbed delivery truck ran a red light at 50 miles an hour, T-boning my driver's side with sickening force. The metal crumpled like an aluminum soda can, spinning my heavy truck across 3 lanes of traffic until I smashed sideways into a concrete barrier. The world turned white, then dark, then filled with the sound of sirens. I woke up under the buzzing fluorescent lights of Emory University Hospital on Clifton Road. My chest felt crushed, my left wrist was swollen and locked in a splint, and warm blood was drying across my temple into my gray hair. The ER doctor informed me that I had suffered 2 fractured ribs, a broken wrist from bracing against the steering wheel, and 12 stitches across my forehead from the shattered glass. When the intake nurse, a soft-spoken woman named Sarah, leaned over my gurney and asked if there was a family member they should contact, I didn't hesitate. I gave her Mason's cell phone number. Because no matter how distant your family has grown, when you are lying battered on a hospital gurney, you don't call a neighbor. You call your son, nurse. Sarah stepped to the mobile workstation beside my bed to make the call. Because her hands were sterile and snapping into rubber gloves, she tapped the speakerphone button on the wall unit. The ringing echoed across the crowded corner of the emergency room, audible to 2 attending doctors, 3 trauma nurses, and an elderly woman resting in the adjacent gurney, separated only by a thin curtain. Mason answered on the 4th ring, his voice flat, clipped, and instantly annoyed. Yeah? Who is this? Sarah kept her voice calm and professional. Hello, Mr. Mason Vance? This is Nurse Sarah calling from the Emergency Trauma Department at Emory University Hospital. I'm calling regarding your father, Garrett Vance. He was brought in by ambulance following a severe motor vehicle collision. Before she could finish detailing my injuries, Mason's voice cut straight through the speakerphone, sharp as a razor. Is he dead? The entire section of the ER fell dead silent. Nurse Sarah froze mid-sentence, her eyes widening in shock. The doctor at the foot of my bed paused his charting, and the elderly woman in the next bed turned her head, clutching her blanket. No, sir, Sarah stammered, caught off guard by his tone. Your father is stable, but he has sustained multiple fractures and head trauma. He needs family present right now. Okay, so he's fine then, Mason interrupted without a trace of concern. Gigi and I are literally at the gate boarding our flight to Miami Beach for a 4-day resort trip with her friends. Tell him he'll be fine. He's a tough guy. Before Sarah could plead with him, Gigi's sharp voice blasted through the speakerphone from the airport terminal background. Mason, hang up right now. If you dawdle another 5 minutes, we're going to lose our priority seats in first class. Right, gotta go, Mason added casually, and the line went dead with a harsh beep. Nurse Sarah stood frozen beside my gurney, staring at the wall unit in disbelief. Tears welled up in the eyes of the elderly woman in the bed beside me, who began softly crying out of pity for what she had just witnessed. A doctor slowly shook his head, but as I lay there beneath those fluorescent lights, staring up at the white ceiling tiles, the physical pain in my cracked ribs slowly faded, replaced by a quiet realization. The son I had broken my back for 17 years to raise wasn't the man standing on the other end of that phone. By 9 o'clock that evening, the chaotic noise of the emergency room had faded into the dull hum of the 5th-floor trauma ward. The pain medication pumped into my IV line dulled the throbbing in my wrist, but it couldn't stop my mind from racing. I lay under the scratchy hospital blanket, staring at the muted television in the corner. Every rational bone in my body told me to go to sleep, but the father in me, the man who had spent 17 years single-handedly protecting his son, couldn't let go of the faint hope that Mason had simply reacted out of panic at the airport. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to give him one last chance to be the son I thought I raised. With my usable right hand, I picked up my phone from the bedside tray and dialed Mason's cell phone. It rang 3 times before he finally picked up, his voice heavy with loud dance music and ambient laughter echoing in the background. Dad, he answered, his tone laced with unconcealed irritation. Look, I told you we were boarding. We just touched down in Miami and we're heading to the lounge with Gigi's friends. Why are you calling me right now? Mason, I said softly, my voice raspy from the breathlessness caused by my broken ribs. I'm up in the trauma ward at Emory. I have 2 cracked ribs, a fractured wrist, and 12 stitches across my head. I'm sitting in this room alone. Dad, that sounds rough. It really does, Mason replied, his voice flat, devoid of warmth or empathy. but you said yourself you're stable. They aren't rushing you into emergency surgery. Gigi and her circle have had this cabana booked since January. You know how hard it is to cancel these things. You're a tough guy, Dad. You've survived construction sites your whole life. You'll be fine for a few days. I closed my eyes tightly, feeling a tear slip down my bruised cheek. In 62 years of life, I had never begged another human being for anything. I was a man who handled problems, a man who provided, a man who built things with his hands. But sitting under those cold hospital lights, battered and abandoned, I swallowed my pride and spoke 3 words that broke my heart. Can you come? The line went quiet for 2 long seconds. In the background, I heard Gigi's sharp voice telling him to order another round of tequila shots. Then Mason let out a heavy sigh into the receiver. Dad, I'm sorry, I really am, he said, his voice cold and final. But vacation comes first right now. Gigi's friends are all here, and I'm not going to ruin her weekend over something you can handle yourself. Get some rest, okay? Love you. He uttered those final 2 words with the hollow energy a person uses when hanging up on a telemarketer, and the line went dead. A few minutes later, a nurse walked in and placed a small plastic bag on my bedside table containing my torn, blood-stained clothes from the crash. I realized I had no clean shirt or toiletries for the next morning. Suppressing the ache in my chest, I opened my messaging app to text Mason my exact room number, asking if he could at least call a courier service to drop off a spare gym bag from my house. I typed out the short message and tapped send. Instantly, a bright red exclamation mark flashed on the screen. Message not delivered. I tapped resend. Message not delivered. I tried calling his number directly. It dropped straight to a generic voicemail prompt. My own son had blocked my phone number, so his luxury beach weekend wouldn't be interrupted by his injured father. Before the sting of that realization could settle, my phone vibrated with a social media notification. Because I had created an Instagram account years ago to keep up with Mason's life, an automated pop-up appeared on my screen. Gigi Vance just posted a story. I tapped the screen. A high-definition video played, showing Gigi standing at an open-air champagne bar inside the Hartsfield-Jackson Airport terminal right before their flight. She was swirling a crystal glass of sparkling wine, her diamond wedding ring catching the light, laughing into the camera before wrapping her arm around Mason's neck. Mason smiled broadly into the lens, blowing a kiss toward the camera. Across the bottom of the video, written in glittering hot pink calligraphy, was her caption, "Bye-bye Atlanta, no family drama is going to stop our paradise getaway. Champagne pop!" I stared at the glowing screen for a quiet moment. The loud music from the video echoed softly off the sterile white walls of my hospital room. Slowly, deliberately, I lowered my phone and set it face down on the plastic bedside tray. The suffocating grief inside my chest vanished. The anger in my veins evaporated. In its place settled a cold, surgical focus. Angry men make noise. Men who are done make moves. I laid my head back against the flat hospital pillow, looked up at the ceiling, and began calculating the exact steps required to dismantle my son's gilded world piece by piece. The shift had officially begun. I spent 3 days inside the trauma ward at Emory University Hospital. While my body was slowly healing, chest wrapped tightly in compression bandages and left arm secured in a fiberglass cast, my mind operated with the precision of a structural engineer. I didn't send another text message. I didn't attempt another phone call. By the time the discharge nurse wheeled me down to the lobby on Monday morning, every trace of grief had been replaced by a clear strategy. I didn't step back into my home as a grieving father begging for his son's love. I stepped in as a man ready to execute a complete financial reset. The minute I walked through the front door of my Inman Park home, supported by a wooden cane, I went straight to my study and executed 3 strategic moves. First, I picked up the landline phone and called my personal banker at Chase on Peachtree Street. I've banked with them for over 30 years. After confirming my identity and social security number, I issued a direct order. Cancel the recurring automated monthly transfer of $6,800 to Mason Vance, effective immediately. The teller typed for a moment, hit enter, and confirmed the cancellation. It took exactly 20 seconds to sever the financial umbilical cord that had been funding my son's bloated lifestyle. Second, I picked up my cell phone and dialed a private nursing agency out of Sandy Springs. Within 2 hours, a practical registered nurse named Helen arrived at my house. I signed a 4-week contract for daily home care assistance, comfortably paying a professional stranger for medical care rather than begging my own blood for a single moment of sympathy. My third call was to my cousin, Ephraim Vance, a seasoned estate attorney with 35 years of experience, operating out of a historic brick office building in downtown Atlanta. By 10 o'clock the following morning, despite the deep ache in my ribs, I sat across from Ephraim's polished mahogany desk. I laid out the facts without emotion: the wedding expenses, the $6,800 monthly transfers, and the cold rejection on the hospital floor while I lay bleeding. Ephraim put on his reading glasses, listened in heavy silence, and then opened his laptop. "Garrett," he said softly, leaning forward, "before we modify your documents, there's something you need to see. 6 months ago, a commercial property appraisal firm in Buckhead ran an equity search on your Inman Park property. The request was filed under an LLC, registered directly to Mason Vance." My jaw tightened. "What kind of search?" Ephraim turned the screen toward me. "He didn't just run a valuation, Garrett. He hired a consultant to draft a preliminary mortgage agreement against this house. He was estimating a $1.2 million equity payout upon your passing, funds he was planning to use as a down payment for a luxury boat docked at Lake Lanier." A dark smile touched my lips. The arrogance was worse than I thought, but it only made my resolve firmer. "Pull up my file, Ephraim," I said smoothly. "We are rewriting everything." Over the next 2 hours, we restructured my entire estate. Mason was stripped of every line of inheritance. My historic Inman Park home, my investment portfolios, and my $1.1 million life insurance policy were officially removed from his name. Instead, the entire estate was legally transferred into a newly created irrevocable trust, the Garrett Vance Regional Engineering Scholarship Fund, dedicated solely to providing full-ride college tuition for underprivileged single-parent students across Georgia. Then, under Georgia probate law, Ephraim drafted a strict, enforceable no-contest clause into the trust and will documents. It explicitly stipulated that if Mason Vance or any legal representative attempted to challenge the validity of the trust in court, their legal standing as a beneficiary, or any contingent claim to the estate, would be permanently revoked, and the trust was fully authorized to seek fee-shifting remedies to recover all litigation costs directly from the contestant. Ephraim printed the final legal binder. "This holds up under Georgia state law, Garrett," he said, sliding the papers across the desk. "If he tries to contest this without a rock-solid legal basis, he will be buried under his own legal debt." I picked up the pen with my steady right hand, signed my name across every document, and closed the leather folder. The structure was completely locked and airtight by Tuesday evening, while I was sitting comfortably in my armchair in Inman Park, with my arm in a cast. 600 miles south in Miami Beach, the foundation of my son's artificial lifestyle began to crumble. Mason and Gigi were hosting a dinner at an exclusive beachfront steakhouse on South Beach, surrounding themselves with 6 of Gigi's wealthy colleagues and friends. True to form, Mason spent the evening playing the role of the generous host, ordering prime dry-aged steaks, seafood towers, and 3 bottles of top-shelf vintage wine. He sat at the head of the white linen table, soaking in the admiration of Gigi's circle, assuming his father's money would handle the bill as usual. When the waiter presented the check containing a $2,400 dinner bill, Mason didn't blink. He reached into his wallet, pulled out his Primary Rewards credit card with practiced flair, and handed it to the server. 2 minutes later, the waiter returned, leaning in discreetly to whisper that the card had been declined due to insufficient available funds. Mason's face flushed, but he let out a forced laugh, waving his hand as he handed over his secondary card. "Must be a temporary system glitch," he assured the table. "Go ahead and run this one." A minute later, the server returned again, accompanied by the floor manager. The second card was declined as well. His primary credit lines had been heavily maxed out over the weekend, and without my automated $6,800 monthly transfer hitting his checking account the morning before, there was zero liquid cash available to cover the balance or clear his pending credit payments. The manager politely informed him that unless another form of payment was provided, they would have to involve venue security. The silence that descended upon the table was deafening. Gigi's friends exchanged embarrassed looks as one of her corporate partners reluctantly pulled out his own Amex to cover the bill. Humiliated, Mason ran out of the restaurant into the warm, humid night toward the valet parking area, his hands shaking as he opened his phone, frantically unblocking my number to dial my cell. It went straight to my automated voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail. That was when the dam broke. Out in the valet parking lot, away from the dining room, Gigi lost her temper. Furious at the public embarrassment in front of the people she tried so hard to impress, she marched up to Mason and delivered a stinging slap directly across his face, her voice shrieking over the ocean breeze. "You liar! You swore to me your father covered your whole life. You just ruined my entire reputation." Over the next 36 hours, my phone turned into a barrage of desperation. Mason and Gigi unleashed 79 missed calls and 45 text messages, their tone wildly spiraling with every passing hour. It began with panic. "Dad, pick up. Something is wrong with the bank." Then it shifted to hollow apologies. "Dad, I'm so sorry about the hospital. Please answer." And finally, as the reality of their situation set in, it devolved into manipulation. Gigi sent a long text from her phone. "Garrett, you are being incredibly selfish. You left us stranded without funds in another state. Do you have any idea how much stress you are causing Mason right now?" I read every single message. I listened to every voicemail. Then I set my phone face down on the wooden coffee table beside my mug of hot black coffee. Outside, a steady summer rain was pattering against the roof of my historic Inman Park home. I leaned back against the plush leather cushions, listening to the rhythm of the rain, enjoying the quiet warmth of my living room. I didn't yell. I didn't send a bitter reply. I simply let the silence do its work, allowing my son to experience the exact consequences of his choices. By late Tuesday morning, the rain over Inman Park had cleared, leaving a crisp humidity hanging over the historic tree-lined avenue. Forced to cut their trip short by 4 embarrassing days, Mason and Gigi landed back at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, exhausted and stressed. Instead of heading home to their midtown condo, Mason drove his silver sedan straight to my house. At precisely 11:40 a.m., the sharp ring of my front doorbell echoed through the quiet hallway. I was sitting in my favorite armchair in the front living room, wearing a clean button-down shirt over my chest wraps, my left wrist resting in its fiberglass cast, reading the morning edition of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I folded the newspaper once, set my coffee cup down, picked up my wooden cane, and walked slowly to the foyer. I unlocked the heavy original oak front door and pulled it open, standing tall in the doorway. Mason stood on the porch steps, looking pathetic. His linen shirt was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot, and his posture slumped under the weight of sudden financial reality. Gigi stood 2 paces behind him, wearing oversized sunglasses, her face twisted into a desperate, rehearsed smile as she tried to assemble an apologetic stance. Before Mason could manage a word, Gigi took a quick step forward, clasping her hands together. "Garrett! Oh, thank goodness you're okay," she gushed, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "Look, there's clearly been a massive misunderstanding about Miami, and we just rushed straight from the airport to clear everything up." I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes locked dead on my son's pale, trembling face. "Didn't you block this number?" I asked softly, my voice flat and devoid of anger. Mason's mouth opened, but not a single sound came out. The color drained from his skin, realizing in a split second that his airport excuse had been completely exposed. Without waiting for a response, without raising my voice, I gripped the edge of the heavy oak door and pulled it shut. The deep, solid click of the deadbolt echoed across the porch like a judge's gavel coming down in a courtroom. The silence lasted for 3 seconds before the porch erupted. Gigi lost her composure. Abandoning her fake apology, she began violently pounding her fists against the heavy oak paneling, her voice shrieking across the quiet neighborhood. "You spiteful old man," she screamed, her voice cracking with rage. "Are you seriously trying to ruin our lives over a phone call? You owe us that money. Open this door right now." Her loud tantrums echoed down the street, causing several of my longtime Inman Park neighbors, people I had known for 20 years, to step out onto their porches, crossing their arms and pointing at the embarrassing spectacle. Realizing his wife's screaming was drawing a crowd, Mason's defiance shattered into panic. He grabbed Gigi's arm, pulled her back, and dropped onto his knees on the porch floor, right in front of the locked door. "Dad, please." Mason sobbed, his hands clutching the iron doorknob as tears streamed down his cheeks. "Dad, I'm begging you, open the door. We don't have enough money to pay next month's rent. They're going to evict us. I'm sorry, Dad. Please, just talk to me." He wasn't genuinely sorry yet. He was panicked, cornered, and desperate to fix the financial collapse threatening his life. For 20 minutes, my son knelt on that porch, weeping and pleading like a child who had realized the floor beneath his feet was gone. Inside, I walked calmly back to my armchair, adjusted my reading glasses, and reopened the morning paper. As his desperate cries vibrated softly through the heavy wooden door, I took a slow sip of my hot coffee, turned to the local news page, and let him sit with the full weight of the situation he had created. A full week passed before I saw my son again. During those 7 days, the panic slowly dissolved into a painful, necessary self-reflection. There were no more barrage texts, no furious phone calls, and no hysterical scenes on my front porch. Instead, on a quiet Thursday morning, an envelope arrived in my mailbox, a 4-page letter written entirely in Mason's own handwriting. It wasn't typed by a lawyer, nor was it vetted by a PR firm. Page after page, his handwriting trembled as he acknowledged his cowardice, owning up to every cruel word he had spoken at the airport, every moment he had chosen status over his own father, and the cold reality of leaving me bleeding on a hospital gurney. He didn't ask for a single dollar in that letter. He simply asked for permission to sit in my kitchen for 30 minutes. That afternoon, I unlocked the front door and let him inside. Mason walked into my house completely alone. No Gigi, no corporate swagger, and no designer sunglasses. He looked like he had aged 10 years and 7 days. The arrogant posture his wife had spent years curating was gone, replaced by the sunken frame of a man whose illusions had been shattered. He pulled out a wooden chair at the kitchen table and sat down, bowing his head as tears dripped onto the polished oak surface. For 3 quiet hours, we sat in that kitchen. For the first time in his 30 years of life, Mason didn't try to manage the situation, pitch a justification, or manipulate the conversation. He talked with raw honesty. He confessed how he and Gigi had been drowning under the weight of trying to fake a high society lifestyle in Buckhead, using my $6,800 monthly transfer as a permanent crutch to cover their inflated rent, designer clothes, and luxury leases while saving $0 of his own salary. Then his voice cracked and a bitter laugh escaped his chest. "She's gone, Dad," Mason whispered, wiping his bloodshot eyes with the back of his hand. "The second the bank confirmed that your monthly transfer was permanently canceled." Gigi cleared out her wardrobe, took her bags, and moved into her mother's place in River Oaks. She filed for separation yesterday morning. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with painful clarity. "She didn't love me, Dad. She never did. I was just the monthly access pass to your bank account. The moment the money stopped, I stopped existing to her." I sat across from him, my left arm still immobilized in its fiberglass cast, listening to the ruin of his pride. Part of me, the father who had raised him alone since he was a motherless boy of 13, felt a quiet sting of pity. But the hardened man who had laid down his life's work to build a real foundation refused to let sentimentality override reality. Mason reached his trembling hand across the table, stopping just inches short of mine, his voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry, Dad. Not for the money, not for the condo, but for leaving you in that hospital room. I was a terrible son, and I don't expect you to forgive me." I looked at my son, watching the tears stream down his face. I drew a slow, steady breath that pulled against my healing ribs, keeping my voice cold, firm, and immovable. "I hear your words, Mason," I said, every syllable echoing off the kitchen cabinets with quiet authority. "And I acknowledge your remorse. But you need to understand something right now. I know you're sorry will never mean everything goes back to the way it was. The bank account is closed forever. The inheritance is gone. The $6,800 a month will never return. You built your life on someone else's sacrifice, and now you get to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet as a grown man. I will not pay your rent. I will not cover your divorce lawyers, and I will not rescue you from the mess you made. You are going to face every single consequence of your choices alone." Mason didn't scream. He didn't argue. He simply closed his eyes, bowed his head, and nodded slowly, accepting the full weight of the boundary I had drawn between us. The boy who had relied on my open checkbook was gone, and the long, painful process of him becoming a real man had finally begun. 3 months passed, bringing the soft warmth of early autumn to the Georgia coast. The fiberglass cast was finally off my left wrist. My fractured ribs had completely knit back together, and my 2017 Chevrolet Silverado 2500, freshly repaired with a new driver's side door and a smooth alignment, rolled effortlessly down Highway 17. Sitting in the passenger seat was my lifelong buddy, Clyde. We had spent 2 decades taking quiet fishing trips across the South, and he was the kind of man who understood that true friendship doesn't require filling every quiet minute with empty chatter. We rolled into historic Savannah, Georgia, late Friday afternoon, checking into a comfortable riverfront inn right off Factor's Walk. For 2 full days, we lived on our own clock, completely free of past burdens and family drama. We sat at a rustic wooden table along the Savannah River, cracking open steamed blue crabs and enjoying fresh, wild-caught shrimp while listening to the low, steady hum of heavy container ships moving slowly out toward the open Atlantic. In the mornings, we walked along the cobblestone streets beneath ancient live oaks draped in Spanish moss, stopping at small local diners for black coffee and hot biscuits. Back in Atlanta, Mason was living in a modest one-bedroom apartment, working 60 hours a week to cover his own expenses, while his divorce proceedings moved quietly through the courts. He called me once every Sunday evening, not to ask for financial rescue, but simply to check on my health and update me on his progress. He was learning how to be self-sufficient, step by painful step, and for the first time in his adult life, our relationship was grounded in honest reality rather than a monthly check. On our final morning in Savannah, I woke up before dawn and walked down to the edge of Tybee Island Beach alone. The morning air was crisp and salt-laced, carrying the deep roar of ocean waves crashing onto the wide, sandy shore. I leaned against the wooden railing of the boardwalk, pulled my jacket tight against the coastal breeze, and watched as the first rays of golden sunlight broke over the dark horizon, painting the clouds in shades of deep amber and pink. Standing there beneath the wide Atlantic sky, I took a long, deep breath that filled my healed lungs without a single trace of pain. A quiet, profound realization washed over my chest. The ghost of that cold hospital room in Emory was officially gone. The haunting echo of my son's dismissive voice at the airport terminal no longer held a single drop of power over my soul. I hadn't lost a family that night. I had simply stripped away an illusion and reclaimed my own life. I was a man of firm principles, a father who had fulfilled his duties, and an independent human being who owed no explanation to anyone. I had survived the crash, dismantled the arrogance of those who took my sacrifice for granted, and stepped into a future defined by quiet dignity, peace, and absolute freedom. Thank you for watching this explosive chapter of Dad's Ultimate Payback. If Garrett Vance's story of quiet endurance, unshakable boundaries, and the ultimate triumph of self-respect resonated with you today, please take a second to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another story of absolute justice. Drop a comment below letting me know the exact city, state, or country you are tuning in from today. A massive shout out to all our loyal viewers standing strong for their families and their principles across the globe. Keep your boundaries firm, protect your legacy, and I will see you in the next episode.